Hello everyone, I have a problem with Don't Starve. When you start out in this game, everything is super new and intimidating. It pulls you in trying to figure out all the little details of the mysterious world presented to you. However, once you get to the stage where dying is no longer a problem, the intrigue you had before is completely gone. No longer do you worry about what the night might be hiding, because you feel like you've learned it all already. There's countless guides, tutorials, and wiki articles about the game, all readily available to answer even the smallest inquiry. And I'm gonna be honest here, it's boring. It's not the same game when you feel like you have the answer to everything. So today, I intend to change that. I went out of my way to look for the most obscure information on Don't Starve. I found stuff I had no idea existed and events I didn't even know happened. And it was a lot of fun actually. So I hope to share that with you through this chart I made from all the most well-known stuff to what I think are the most unknown. Feel free to skip to around this time if you think you know the basics, but for everyone else, let's begin. The sky is where all the well-known knowledge about Don't Starve resides. Like how every character's name starts with the letter W. You have Wilson, Willow, Wolfgang, Wendy, Wix, Wicker, Wes, you get the point. Not even Maxwell is exempt from this rule, since according to the lore, his real name is William Carter, which also happens to start with a W. You know what else starts with W? That's right, Hamlet and Shipwrecked. Hamlet and Shipwrecked are two DLCs for the single-player version of the game, both of which offer a variety of new playstyles in an entirely new world. I could go on about seasons, bosses, characters, and biomes these introduce, but that would probably take hours since both of these expansions are almost like a new game. I recommend you buy single-player just to play them if you haven't already, since it's one of those things you have to experience for yourself to appreciate fully. Charlie is the main antagonist of Don't Starve Together. She's the queen of the constant and behind all of the terrible bosses like Bee Queen. She's also the thing that attacks you at night if you don't have a torch. Literally an omnipresent god in Don't Starve. Oh wait, no. You just got hit by Charlie and now you lost a lot of sanity. And now, because of you, there's going to be a bunch of nightmare creatures that spawn. Technically speaking, there are 7 different types of nightmare creatures. There's the 2 regular ones that spawn frequently. There's the Terror Claw, which terrorizes you on a boat. There's the Wavy Jones, who doesn't actually attack you and instead prefers to mess with your boat. There's the Shadow Hands, which steal your fire, and the Nightmare introduced in Shipwrecked. God, this game is a lot of... And then there's the 4 bosses, Mr. Skits, Mr. Skittish, and this obscenely lawn guy. Yeah, eat these green caps so a terror beak doesn't randomly kill you while you're watching this. Moving on, the ruins. This is the big, scary endgame area of Don't Starve. It contains a dangerous amount of ways to die, ranging from more nightmare creatures to bishops sniping you across the map. However, this place also contains some of the best gear in the game, so it's a high risk, high reward kind of area. On top of that, if you want to beat the game, you'll have to eventually travel here to be able to summon the final boss. For a place that's hidden in some random corner of the caves, it sure has a lot of stuff going for it. The last entries on this tier are some stuff you can learn by watching the well-made Don't Starve animations. Like how Abigail is dead, Wormwood is from the moon and Wickford is just an actor, and Weber was eaten by a spider, which somehow gave us this. But you all know this, don't you? After all, this tier is filled with the most common knowledge about this game. Let's move on to some less common information. The Gorge and Forge are some Don't Starve events which used to come around back in the day. The Forge was a fighting simulator in which these characters had to team up against waves and waves of ongoing enemies, while the Gorge was a cooking simulator. It's more fun than it sounds, I promise. Despite the positive reaction from the community, the events barely made a profit due to the high expense of the servers, which resulted in them only ever appearing 3 times. The Forge was playable in December of 2017 and again in 2018, while the Gorge was only ever playable in June of 2018. Luckily, it is still possible to play these events through the use of the Reforged and Regorged mods, so if you want to experience them you can use those, which I'll link in the description. What's interesting about the Gorge in particular is that it reveals some lore about the merms. You see, in the Gorge you must feed this giant wormhole in the sky called the Gnaw, otherwise you get cursed. If you get cursed, the Gnaw turns you into a merm. It's kind of disgusting actually. Clay made a full-on animation for this transformation. The point here is that every merm was a human at some point. Or at least a robot like Wix. It puts an interesting perspective on things, because anytime you see a merm again, you know that those things aren't monsters. They're people. Disease. This is probably the worst feature to have ever been added to this game, and I am glad it was removed in 2020. For all those unfamiliar, disease was a mechanic which would eventually rot all of your plants and make them unusable. On the surface, this sounds like a cool idea. DST is now a complicated gardening simulator in which you must stop disease from spreading across your plants. But it was nothing like that. In fact, everything you planted would contract disease every 50 or so days, and there was no way to prevent this from happening. No cures, no little tricks to stop disease from appearing, just pain. I'm really happy it's gone, so I don't have to worry about the inevitable death of grass. Don't Starve New Home is a Don't Starve spin-off licensed by Clay but not actually developed by them. That's fancy words for it's a non-canon free-to-play Don't Starve mobile game. There's not much information on it since the game hasn't released yet, but there is some early footage of it on YouTube. The basic gameplay involves new characters doing quests for the regular Don't Starve cast, and from the looks of it, that's about it. Sure, there's a bit of survival in there, as well as what seems to be some kind of main hub area, but other than that it's just an endless quest simulator. Although I do find it kind of funny how much of a Dick Wilson is to the player. Also, there's one thing I should probably mention before I move forward. In June of this year, a bunch of New Home files were leaked, which included some never before seen Don't Starve Together sprites. The reason I bring this up is to say that I won't be including any of these unused images in this video. Otherwise, the entire thing would be me showing you a scrapped picture of some Don't Starve creature. If you want to see more of these sprites, I've added a link in the description to a forum post showcasing them all. Let's carry on. Wix was made by Wagstaff. For those who don't know who Wagstaff is, he's this inventor guy who appears in random parts of Don't Starve, and this theory believes that he created Wix at some point in time. Not only does Wix's name closely match the format of one of Wagstaff's other inventions, but they appear to know each other from somewhere. When Wagstaff examines Wix on the Nightmare Throne, he says, "Is that... but it couldn't be." And we can go further. When Wix examines Wagstaff, he also tells another machine not to trust him, clearly referencing Wagstaff. With all of this evidence, it's pretty clear that the two have crossed paths at some point, and it's likely that Wagstaff created Wix. I say likely because, despite the proof, there's no definitive hardcore evidence that he created Wix. It's just a theory. A very likely theory. Tallbirds were a failed experiment. When you examine a tallbird as Maxwell, he says, "Those were a failed experiment." Nothing else to say here. It's kind of self-explanatory. Maxwell is Wendy's uncle. Another short but important bit. In Wendy's animation, we see her dad near the end of the video. Now, is it just me, or does this guy look suspiciously similar to Maxwell? Like you get an image of him, slap a mustache on him, and bam, you have Wendy's father. Well, as it turns out, that's because this man is Maxwell's brother, Jack Carter. In an image from the William Carter puzzles, we get an image of Jack's letter which he sent to Maxwell. In this letter he mentions someone called the Twins. The characters are pawns. Metaphorically, the single player Don't Starve game had a big chess team. There's a bunch of clockworks imitating chess pieces, living on turf that looks like a chessboard, and the ending is simply titled Checkmate. The original Don't Starve game had only 8 characters. Conveniently, there is also 8 pawns on a chessboard. If we assume that Maxwell is the king and Charlie the queen, then we get a fully functional chess set. This makes all the characters a literal pawn in Maxwell's plan. Wagstaff is not in the constant. Another interesting theory. The idea behind this one is that Wagstaff is a hologram and not physically there in the constant. If you listen closely to his voice, you'll notice it gets more and more distorted when he's at low health. Take a listen at it for yourself. It definitely sounds like a signal is getting weaker the more damaged he is. Another interesting detail is what happens when he sits on the Nightmare Throne. Normally no one is able to escape the Nightmare Throne, not even Maxwell. And yet when you return to the throne in another playthrough, Wagstaff is nowhere to be found. The explanation for this supports our current theory that Wagstaff is not in the constant. I mean, it would be pretty difficult to hold something in place when that thing isn't even actually there. Still not convinced? If we take a look at Don't Starve Together, we can see that Wagstaff is called a grainy transmission and flickers around like static. Okay, yeah, the game is practically giving you the answer there. He's not in the constant, he's just a hologram. So you know how all the characters' voices are some kind of instrument? Well, then what kind of instrument is used to make Weber's voice? Seriously, what even is this? Apparently someone on the forums had the same question, and this is what a Clay developer had to say. I won't say I did drop a synth down the stairs, but I won't say I didn't. And to this day, that is the only piece of information we have regarding Weber's voice. A synthesizer falling down the stairs. Wix's skeleton refers to the fact that you can see a full human skeleton inside Wix when he is struck by lightning. Normally, I'd say this has some kind of lore significance, but it looks like it's just a visual gag, since every character has weird bones in random parts of their body. Like, why the hell do they have bones inside their hair and their dress? Again, I do think this is just a funny visual gag added in by the developers, because if that's not the case, then that would mean we've been playing as flesh monsters without hair or clothes the entire time. So we'll just say it's a visual gag. Meteus was the king of the ancient civilization that once existed in the caves beneath the surface of the Don't Starve world. This civilization consisted of strange bug-like creatures which looked something like the statues in the ruins. Information on the Meteus is limited to a bunch of murals from an official ARG and a few quotes that appear in-game, but there is a story here. Meteus is the one wielding the cane on the right, while the other ruler is holding a torch. According to the character quotes, These depict a starving and failing civilization which becomes powerful and prosperous after discovering something from a portal. The power was so strong that according to some in-game quotes, the people shed their skins and transformed into what many believe are the nightmare creatures. However, the story doesn't end there, as you can resummon the king in the form of the ancient fuel weaver. A lot of his quotes imply that his civilization eventually fell through the overuse of this power, and he warns the survivors to not do the same mistake he did. I say warn, but in reality he beats you to the ground to stop you from activating the portal. Essentially, the tale of a fallen kingdom. Maxwell's door is a structure that only spawns in single player, which looks eerily similar to Maxwell's face. Activating the door will lead you to adventure mode, which is probably one of the hardest non-boss related things you can do in this game. You're tasked with traveling through 5 different levels which are designed to be as difficult as possible. There's a lot of dangerous mobs, little resources, and powerful clockworks guarding the exit to each level. As you progress through the levels, Maxwell gets progressively more angry until he has had enough of you. The final level involves you doing the same thing as normal, but this time in permanent nighttime. Good luck beating this if you forgot to craft a miner's hat. Once you beat this final level, you get to the Don't Starve ending, where it turns out that Maxwell was not the one in charge, only a puppet by the real rulers named them. Wartox was initially a scrapped character for the single player version of Don't Starve. There's many unused characters, but Wartox was probably one of the more well-known ones. He was so popular in fact, that when Clay teased a silhouette of him on the forums, people instantly recognized Wartox. Getting people excited over a 7-year-old unused character is quite the impressive feat, but not as impressive as Don't Starve 2. What is Don't Starve 2, you ask? Well, it's a pun I'm about to make unfunny by explaining it. Since making a multiplayer mode for Don't Starve was proven difficult, Clay made an entirely new game specifically made to play multiplayer. A sequel of sorts, Don't Starve Together. This actually goes a bit deeper when you break down the word together into to get her. The title of the game turns into Don't Starve to Get Her, referencing how the end goal of the game is to reach her and escape the game. When I first found out about this, I was shocked. I didn't know that Clay was Shakespeare, although I guess after writing thousands of Wilson quotes, it turns you into him. The world's edge is the edge of the world. Originally, it was just a bunch of fake waves before real water was added. However, even this real water has an end to it, and eventually you'll reach this waterfall that leads to a deeper ocean. Something about this site has always unnerved me and I can't explain why. I guess it's just the idea that something bigger and badder is out there. It makes you feel small when you realize the entire map is just a tiny plateau above a massive dark ocean. This feeling is made more creepy if you play Shipwrecked. In Shipwrecked, at the edge of the world is a bunch of fog obscuring the screen. If you enter the fog, it plops you back on the other side of the map, while the character mentions feeling something touching them. It's a very well designed way of making the player feel small, for if you venture too far, you realize that this inviting tropical vacation is actually a tiny speck in the void-filled world of Don't Starve. AFK servers is something you might stumble upon while searching the server list. There's a surprising amount of people who turn this game on just to AFK for skins that you receive playing it. The way the system works is that you get a gift for opening the game, and then you can get another 8 per week for playing it. It's understandable why people do this, since Don't Starve has really good chances for receiving rare items. It's not uncommon to see screenshots of people logging into the game only to be greeted by a character skin. There's been a rumor spreading around that it's possible to get DLC characters this way, but as far as I know those rumors are false. Though apparently it's possible to receive skins for a character you haven't unlocked yet, so there's that. Wes brought the crows to the constant. If you examine a crow's Maxwell, he says, "I don't know how they got here," implying that he did not create the birds, despite creating much of the rest of the creatures. So how did they get here? Well, in Wes's animation we see him piss off 2 crows and then accidentally run into a portal, bringing the crows with him. I'll let you put 2 and 2 together. One theory I've heard is that one of these crows became Corvus Goodfeather, the guy behind the carnival. However, there's no real proof for that. Another interesting theory about this video is how all of Wes's bad luck begins right after he breaks an imaginary mirror, which is said to give you 7 years of bad luck. You did this to yourself, you fool. Epilogue Island. The area you reach after beating adventure mode. This place is shrouded in mystery as nothing you explore will save on your map, making it difficult to explore. Somewhere on this island, hidden in the darkness, is a graveyard with the developers' names on the graves. There's also a small island that's only accessible with cheats. There appears to be a machine which can take you out of Epilogue Island. However, using it will just return you to Maxwell. Overall, the place feels like it's hiding something more, but in reality there's not much there. Walter is Canadian. Okay, let's speedrun this one. In Walter's animation we see him holding a map with the werebeaver on it. The werebeaver is Woody and Woody is Canadian. Therefore the myth of the werebeaver must be in Canada, and if Walter is searching for a mythical Canadian creature in Canada, then he's probably Canadian. Got it. Quick Drop is a mechanic in Don't Starve which allows you to instantly drop items by right-clicking them. This feature was not always in the game though, and if you wanted to drop items quickly, you'd have to download a mod called Quick Drop. The mod was eventually added into the game as a quality of life feature. What's funny about this though is that you can see exactly what went down by reading this mod's files. There's a message in here that reads, "If any clay devs find themselves snooping around in this code, I'm fairly certain that you can completely replicate this mod by putting 3 lines of code at line 163 in the player action picker component. Thanks, love you." Find it kind of funny how some Don't Starve developer was looking through some mods, read this message, then decided to release an update. Lunar Mob Variations. This is probably the scariest part of the entire Return of Them update. When you kill a hound on the lunar island, there's a chance he will be reborn as a horror hound. The horror hound functions the same as the regular hound, but it just looks different. The concept of the moon turning regular mobs into horror versions is so great, and yet the only horror mob that exists other than the hound is the Moonglass Pengull. Goddamn Pengull. I wish more was done with this feature, since one can only imagine what would happen if other mobs got corrupted by the moon. Just think about a lunar Deerclops, a stronger version of the iconic boss mob that you would fight on the lunar island. So much could have been done with this mechanic, and yet it was abandoned the day it was added. Wickerbottom's eyes are intriguing to say the least. As you know, Wickerbottom has a stat which prevents her from sleeping. So what happens if you force her to sleep via pan flute? Nightmare fuel. Another cool experiment. When you get hit by Charlie in the dark, there's actually a hidden animation for it. You're going to need 2 players and moggles for this to work. Someone is going to have to sacrifice themselves to the night, while the other person will watch through the darkness using the moggles. The results are kind of disappointing. You might have expected to see Charlie attacking the player, but all you see are some black particles suddenly hitting the player. Very underwhelming. Another cool hidden animation is the tall bird lay egg animation. I don't want to talk about it. Wii Game Skin Exclusive. You might be wondering what a Wii game even is. And essentially it's a Chinese web store similar to Steam, which was the main method for distributing Don't Starve Together in China back in 2016. Apparently Don't Starve Together was the first game to launch on this platform. If you happen to pre-order it here, you would get 2 skins that were not available anywhere else. Not 1, but 2 skins that were only accessible from this random Chinese store. You might be wondering why Clay even allowed such a thing to happen. When you look at the data, it does make a little bit more sense. There's this site which I'm pretty sure is down now, which used to show you a bunch of statistics about Don't Starve players, including what country they connected from. Here's a graph of the countries which have the most players in Don't Starve. Obviously, America is at the top. Now here's the same graph if we include China. Yeah, every other country combined doesn't even make up half of this population. Really makes you feel small. Suddenly the decision to release exclusive skins on a Chinese web store makes a lot more sense now. Warbucks is similar to Wartox in that he's a very popular scrapped character. However, the difference with Warbucks is that he wasn't actually scrapped and was playable in the early beta of Hamlet. His stats were as follows: lose less durability from ball pin hammers, gain sanity equal to the amount of coins in your inventory, and lose sanity when eating food that wasn't made in a crockpot. Yeah, his upsides were barely upsides and his downside didn't make you play the game any ever. He did have one thing that no other character to this day has: a custom attack sound. I remember playing this guy and feeling pure happiness when I attacked something and heard this trumpet sound. It's such a small thing but makes a huge difference whenever you decide to fight something. I wish the idea of a custom attack sound was transferred to other characters because it adds a lot more to the experience than you would think. It's just such a good sound. Other than that, he should stay in the files and never come back with his garbage stats. Weber's Skull is an item in single player Don't Starve which allows you to unlock Weber as a playable character. After getting the skull randomly from a spider, you must put it in a grave to unlock him. If you do a little bit of digging into the game files, you can see some unused skulls for all the rest of the characters, including the scrapped ones. What's weird about this is that recently all the Don't Starve Together cast were also added to the files, even though they're clearly never going to be used. It brings up the question of what these were originally intended for. If it isn't just some weirdo in the clay office who has a thing for drawing skulls. The implication of Weber being resurrected from a grave shows us that he has to have died at some point. Judging from the fact that every other character also has skulls, does this mean that every other character is canonically dead? A developer confirmed that Wilson dying multiple times is part of the official timeline, which suggests the same is true for all other characters. So next time you start sucking at this game and dying a lot, don't worry about it too much. Because you being bad at the game and dying multiple times is canon to the story. The potato cup is an old meme which is still sometimes referenced by Clay to this day. You can see it as an emote on their official Discord server and it's even an item in the game. So what is the potato cup? Well, I'll just let the man who created it explain it for himself.
Seth is thinking the stream has reached its pinnacle here, so he's pulling out a fan favorite.
So Letter W is a real big fan of this fact. And I just saw her yelling at me in chat because I was drinking from a water bottle, not a potato. So this all stems from an interview I did a few months ago on N4G, and one of I think the last interview question in there was something along the lines of like, if you were in a don't starve situation in real life, like how would you survive? And I was like, like first things first, like shelter, forage for food, etc., etc. And then I told this little anecdote about camp I went to when I was, I think, like probably 12 or so. It was a wilderness camp, and it was like an overnight camp, but it was very much focused on like hiking and shot rifles, and made this knife. So yeah, I made the sheath for it and fashioned the handle, and then they gave me the blade. And then the last night of that camp, there's a survival night, and basically what that was a few different levels of it. And I picked a level where I think I was allowed like 2 layers of clothing. I got a tarp, 3 feet of twine, 2 raw hot dogs, 2 raw potatoes, and because I had made this knife that month, this knife. So things that I learned that night: picking berries for dinner is an extremely slow process and you're not going to get full. And potatoes are really, really gross when they haven't been cooked. Don't recommend eating an uncooked potato. It's very starchy. So after I ate the first potato, unhappily, I was like, I don't really want to do that again, and I am thirsty. I'm not really enjoying kneeling down and sticking my face in this stream. So, cup complete. I think it's a pretty good cup.
It's a cup.
It's a cup anyway. It's made of potato. I'm going to put some water in it, then I'm going to drink out of it. And then we're going to stop this shenanigans.
Yeah, I think that will certainly put an end to it, Seth. I think this is it. No one's going to ever bring up the potato cup
water.
Again. How is it?
It's starchy. It's starchy water now. Want a sip?
No.
It's fine.
I'm good.
I'm gonna finish it though.
Sadly, Seth Rosen later left Clay Entertainment, but his legacy lives on in the form of an item. The only one of its kind resides in another developer's inventory, waiting for its next great purpose in life. Lawn pig is another word for human meat. In a very early version of Don't Starve Together, players would drop lawn pig when you killed them. This allows you to eat other players on the server and become a professional cannibal. Lawn pig is still fully functional though, allowing you to cook and dry it. The only reason it doesn't exist in the game is because of a single line of code that disables it. Someone literally made a mod where all they did was enable this one line of code, and now you can play with lawn pig on. Some speculate that the reason for its removal was that it was too dark for the game, but I have a different theory. Think about it. You're trying to sell a game where the aim is to survive together with your friends. An item that encourages you to kill and eat your friends would go against every mechanic that encourages you to work together. Not really surprising that it got removed, but if you really want to eat Don't Starve players, then feel free to spawn it in or enable this mod. Secret minigames. I'm actually surprised that most people don't know what these are. If you go to the trade-in and click on one of the birds, it will lead you to one of 4 secret minigames. They are all basic games that have a surprising amount of depth to them. Playing minigames and sometimes doing well in them will give you a profile icon of the bird you clicked on. There's no way to mass farm these icons for spools since you only ever get one. Clicking on the carnival bird will lead you to a maze game. In this game you move around a maze and collect some tokens. That's it. That's all you do. There's not even a way to lose in this game, so feel free to take your precious time collecting all 100 tokens. Doing so will give you a profile icon of Corvus Goodfeather himself. Clicking on the blue bird will lead you to an endless memory game. It plays like a regular memory game, requiring you to memorize 2 of the same images and then clicking on them. The only difference with this one is that you can go on forever if you really wanted to. But the next 2 minigames are where it's at. These are the ones that will get you addicted for the next 40 years trying to get a new high score. The first one looks like a bad mobile game. Because it is a bad mobile game. But there's a twist. You can use one of these 5 tools to enhance your gameplay. The cane removes all types of the color you clicked, the shovel removes an entire row, gunpowder blows 9 tiles up, the spear removes 1 single tile, and the seed attracts birds. Because yes, this game has birds. Apparently you're supposed to scare off birds to get a high score or something, but who cares about that? The real game is about trying to make all the bottom rows the same color so you can feel maximum satisfaction when you clear it out. But for true satisfaction you must play the egg game. The concept is simple. You can swipe numbers vertically and horizontally to add them up. However, you cannot add up numbers if the sum of both of them is over 100. If you can create the number 100, it turns into an egg, giving you a large amount of points. The goal of the game is to make as much eggs as possible, either before the timer finishes, or you run out of space. The maximum number of eggs you can possibly make is 15, which, while impressive by itself, is not the highest possible score you can get. Each time you add numbers together, you gain extra points, so ideally you want to delay getting your egg as much as possible. The problem with this is that the stage of the timer indicates how much points you get for the egg, forcing you to simultaneously play the game as slow and as quickly as possible. I would tell you how to do this, but I don't think I'm experienced enough to know that, so instead I'll link Demon Rebuild's video on how to get the most amount of points achievable. The Nox is kind of like an ox, but not. In the trade-in you meet the suspicious looking guy who tells you about the Nox that pulls his wagon. Upon further investigation he describes it like an ox, but not. Find the answer to the Nox, we must look at the Forge and its Nox helm. Could the Nox be one of the creatures in the Forge? Probably not, since none of the mobs here resemble anything close to an ox. I even checked the mobs outside the Forge, like the beefalo or the wild boar, and the horns on the helmet just didn't match. One thing I've noticed though is that there is a lot of Nox helms in the Forge, so it is possible that they were brought to extinction by the Forge pigs. For all we know, the trade-in guy's Nox is the very last of its kind, which would explain why we never see anything like it in-game. Though I'm probably reading too deep into the lore of the guy whose sole purpose is to give you skins. Achievements actually refer to a number of things. Have you ever noticed how Don't Starve lacks any kind of achievement system? Well, it turns out that that was intentional. Back in the first beta of Don't Starve, the developers created a very small game which had barely anything in it. They wanted to see how the player would react in the environment that was crafted for them. Unfortunately, this simple game didn't work out so well. According to a Clay article, the players would watch the introduction and then turn to us and ask, "What am I supposed to do next?" I imagine a reaction like that is not one you want to get after spending 2 weeks of your life developing an alpha. Luckily, after teaching the player a few basic mechanics, they would begin experimenting on their own and start to actually have fun. Problem was, how do you get them to this point without telling them how to play the game first? The solution? Give them a bunch of tasks to do. In an updated version, the player woke up to Maxwell giving them a long list of random goals like survive 5 days, or find all the teleportado pieces, or subscribe to this. It was sort of like a tutorial for Don't Starve. The developers assumed that by the time the player completed the challenges, they would be ready to start properly playing the game and have fun. Yeah, unfortunately this had quite the unexpected result. Sure, the players would now know exactly what to do, but now they only focused at the task at hand. Apparently, to complete the survive 4 days goal, players just built a campfire and sat still doing nothing for 30 minutes. They were so focused on trying to complete the objective that they forgot about the game they were playing. Once the tasks ran out, they would stop playing since there was nothing left to do. This experience forced the developers to make the game more open-ended, which is how Don't Starve became what it is today. It also taught them that any system similar to tasks was completely redundant, as the goal the player sets themselves is infinitely more valuable than what the game tells them to do. Which is why there's no achievements to be found in Don't Starve. They provide an artificial progression system to a game that doesn't want them. But wait a second. If this is the case, then why is there achievements on the console edition? Well, apparently Sony forces all console games to have achievements, even if you don't want them. To protest the pointless design of achievements, they added a completely pointless structure with the description, a sense of accomplishment for those with nothing else to live for. Turning the structure 725 times, you would get an achievement simply named Despair. Eventually though, it seems like they warmed up to the idea of them, since they now exist in the console port of Don't Starve Together. I couldn't tell you exactly what changed their design philosophy, but that's Don't Starve and its history with achievements. Weird world generation can refer to any worlds with really lucky spawns, or ones that are just unexplainable. I'm sure we've all seen a world that generates in a way that feels wrong. Kind of like walking around for a bit and suddenly finding that the lunar island is somehow connected to the mainland. However, it can get weirder than this. For example, in single player it is possible, albeit extremely rare, to find a wormhole that leads to a small separate island from the mainland. The way this was fixed was by not fixing it, and instead adding a wormhole that allows you to go to the separate island. It's honestly better this way, since having an island that's only accessible by wormhole sounds like a great base idea. However, this can also be extremely annoying, as shown in this forum post. The player is clearly in the correct biome for finding the pig city, and yet it is nowhere to be found. The explanation for this is that it generated on a separate island, which made the city only reachable by a wormhole. The city also seems incredibly small, as it tried to generate all of it on a tiny island. There's only 15 buildings on here, which is awful if your plan was to destroy it for resources. But that's not even the strangest aspect of world generation. There is one phenomenon that is even worse than this. In order to understand how it works, we must first look at how early Don't Starve generated its biomes. The biomes weren't really biomes and were closer to islands connected by long bridges. This eventually got changed to what we have today. However, it is still possible of seeing a small bridge connecting two biomes. But what would happen if the world generation took a few red caps? Well, something like this. Not only does this world have the previously mentioned wormhole glitch, but it also generated a very long bridge. Unlike the mini island, I have zero explanations for why the game decided to generate a long bridge like this. Apparently, it took the guy who got this half a day to walk to the end of it. On the island, he found the only vault goat herd in the entire world. Imagine having to cross this massive bridge anytime you wanted to kill vault goats. That would be horrible. There is another example of this, and it's even worse. In 2015, a player had found the Pig King hiding at the end of an extremely long bridge. The biggest problem with this was that the journey back was so long they starved to death before they could make it back. Just look at this insanity. If we assume that it takes 6 minutes to walk from one end of the world to the other, then walking this bridge would take almost 3 in-game days. Though I must admit, something about a long bridge like this seems strangely appealing. If you ever wanted to make a base that no one would ever reach, then a world like this is the perfect way to do it. It's like the perfect protection against griefers. They can't grief what they can't reach. The 9 Pearl Crab King is the strongest boss in the game, and that is no exaggeration. The regular Crab King is one of the most hated bosses in the game due to how his mechanics work. However, it is possible to make him far stronger and more annoying than ever intended. For those unaware, in order to summon the Crab King, you have to insert 9 gems. He will gain different powers depending on what gems you put in. For example, putting in blue gems improves his freezing ability. But what if I told you there was a gem that was so powerful it increased every stat by 3? It is Pearl's Pearl. It's only possible to get 1 pearl per world, but with commands you can get 9 of them. Putting them all into the Crab King will create the most obnoxiously powerful monster in existence. This guy has 5 times the health of Misery Toadstool. The footage you see in the background is me struggling to kill him while in Super God mode. I am literally invincible and can walk on water, and yet Crab King is still winning. As far as I know, it's basically impossible to kill this guy for a few reasons. For starters, his freezing range is so big that it will still hit you when using ranged weapons. Not only that, but his freezing ability is so powerful that you will stay frozen for multiple minutes at a time. He can also summon a large amount of geysers so quickly that any boats you have will get broken almost instantly. You just can't win against this guy. No matter what you do, he always seems to have the upper hand. There's a good reason you are only able to have 1 pearl per world. Otherwise you would end up summoning Satan himself. The Screecher is an interesting mod because it is made by Clay themselves. In fact, it's so official that it is automatically installed as a mod when you open the game. It came out around the time when every single horror game made you collect 9 notes for some reason. It's clearly inspired by Slender since this game is 9 notes, a forest, and a monster that doesn't like it when you look at it. The difference with the Screecher though is that it has a story. You play as Bill, who is on a week-long camping trip with his wife Sarah in the heavily forested campground of the Pilot Creek. After Sarah goes missing searching for a missing couple in the woods, the game starts and you must investigate the scream that you just heard. Now, when you start up this game, you know none of that, and the only way to figure it out is by dissecting the lore given to you in the 9 notes. As you walk around, with your character sounding like he's about to collapse at any minute, you eventually find another guy, who also sounds like he's about to collapse at any minute. But wait, he's dead! After this point, the Screecher starts to appear in your peripherals, and looking at... After even more walking, you reach a helicopter pad. Here is where you can beat the game and escape by calling the helicopter. You might assume that collecting all 9 notes will give you a better ending, but nope, they do nothing. Overall though, this was a very cool experience, made cooler by the fact that Clay themselves created it. Maybe they'll make something like this again in the future, but I think it's unlikely. There's a lot of unused stuff in this game, but most of it is quite boring. If I were to show you this entire wiki page, I'd be here for another 3 hours. So instead, I'm going to quickly run through what I think are the most interesting unused features, starting off with the target dummy. If you do see spawn dummy target and don't starve together, you can spawn in an invincible entity which tells you how much damage stuff does. For example, if you hit it with a dark sword, it would tell you the damage of the dark sword. For something that's not supposed to be used, it's surprisingly helpful for calculating exact damage numbers. Next one. Back when Don't Starve was a game you could play in your browser, prototyping items would cost you research points. You couldn't prototype stuff for free, you had to do it at the cost of research points. To get research points, you had to convert items at the science machine, and it's just about as grindy as it sounds, which is why it was removed. Another feature that used to be in the early versions were the cave walls. The walls themselves didn't do anything special, but it did look cool. It made you feel like you were really in a cave. The current caves just fill you with a void. What is this? Why is there a void under me? Isn't there supposed to be walls? How did I get down here? This doesn't make sense. You know what does make sense? The shopkeeper. He was this umbrella dude who was supposed to sell you stuff, but this idea was scrapped because the idea of a shop didn't fit in with the world of Don't Starve. The shopkeeper seemed interesting, but he doesn't have much going for him. So let's talk about the Deadly Feast. When I say the word Deadly Feast, what do you think of? I mean, it's a game called Don't Starve, and there's a deadly feast? You're probably thinking of a big scary monster, similar to Krampus. In reality, it's just a meaty stew that instantly kills you when you eat it. Yeah, I'm already getting bored talking about disappointing unused features. Here, take this dab emote. Is that what you want? Look at these other emotes which aren't in the game but can be used with commands. Okay, no, I know. I'll end this section off with a high note. It's the Snapdragon from Hamlet. He is a neutral mob that has the same attacking pattern and sounds as a beefalo. If you kill him, he will turn into a flower, implying that this creature may have grown from one. However, don't be fooling into thinking that this guy is merely just a flower, for the Snapdragon is actually the most powerful mob in the game. Don't believe me? Look what happens when he hits you. He crashes your game. Not even the strongest of armor can protect you from this guy. Perhaps the Snapdragon wasn't added into Hamlet because Clay feared what such a beast would be able to do. Luckily, these guys are only spawnable in single player, so you don't have to worry about people spawning him in Don't Starve Together to crash your game. Yet. Giant mobs is an interesting one, and to explain it, I'll have to explain how Don't Starve is a 3D game. Despite looking like it's 2D, there is actually a third axis which controls how high an object is. The game uses this third axis to control mobs like birds when they fly up into the sky. However, there used to be a bug with this which would cause some mobs to get stuck on the wrong level, making them appear bigger than they actually are. This was most prominent with frogs during frog rain, but it would also happen to some other mobs like buzzards. As you can see, this buzzard looks like a giant bird, when in reality he is just closer to the player's camera, making him look bigger. There is a few quotes from Charlie that are hidden in the game files. All of them have been removed since the Winona rework, but you can still read them on the wiki. Have a look. When talking about Maxwell, you can find pride, arrogance, conceit. This was your fault. You did this. You haven't escaped its pull. Make your jokes, I'll be seeing you soon. There's also a few quotes for Winona, which is canonically her sister. I'm so sorry, I never meant for you to come here. This wasn't a part of my plan, but as you're here now, I suppose I'll have to make do. You've changed so much. How much time has passed for you? I should like to speak face to face. Frog Weber is a character mod which is made by a real Clay developer. Frog Weber is just normal Weber but with an added ability. Using a walking cane you can jump short distances at the cost of hunger. He can even use this short jump to hop over rivers. The animation for the jump is so smooth that this almost feels like it's a real feature in the game. Though I guess that makes sense when you consider who made the mod. This isn't just a one-off mod either. Multiple developers have made multiple different mods for this game. There's even this Peter guy who decided that the game was too hard, so he made a DST easy mode. Wow, imagine cheating as a developer. Sadly, most of these mods don't work anymore, largely due to the fact that they are outdated. Most of them were made 5 years ago. The only reason I was able to play Frog Weber for this video was through a separate mod which fixed the bugs in the first one. So I'll leave a link to that in the description if you want to play as Frog Weber. Gobbler's missing attack animation. Now this one is intriguing. You see, despite being completely harmless to the player, gobblers have a damage value of 20 and an attack speed of 3. For whatever reason, the gobbler has these values assigned to him despite never being able to attack the player. It implies that at some point the gobbler was intended to attack the player, and also tells us that there may be a gobbler attack animation that we've never seen. Through mods, we can visualize what this animation could have looked like. Since gobblers share the same model as pigmen, it reuses the attack animation from the pigman. I think gobblers attacking the player is an interesting concept, since it adds a lot more danger to picking berry bushes than what we currently have. Who knows though, maybe this is a sign that they're planning some kind of attack. Like the gobblers are going to overthrow everyone one day. Because the gobblers are actually them. Now it's time for the fun fact of this video. Wilson and a few other characters have a real voice in these videos. Which is kind of jarring considering you're always hearing this. The Lost Fragment. If you thought Frog Weber and the Screecher were cool, wait till you see this. This is a mod which is part of the William Carter puzzles. Wait, sorry, no, this mod isn't made by Clay, it's made by Mr. Skits. If you try to enable the mod, the game will freeze and crash. This could be because the mod is over 8 years old, but I think the more likely explanation is that Mr. Skits is shit at programming. Luckily, there are still screenshots and a full video of the mod if you're interested in what it did. Basically, it added a new crafting recipe to the magic tab. The new recipe is a portal which when activated takes you to an island with a skull chest on it. Opening the chest will give you a dark sword and knight suit, as well as starting the Shadow Maxwell boss fight. That's right, numerous Shadow Maxwells will attack you with their swords, and sometimes even with meteors. I think this is the closest thing we'll ever get to a proper fight with Maxwell. If you kill them all, a Shadow Gramophone will appear, which plays some Morse code. Deciphering it will give you another code which when entered on the Clay website leads you to this video of Maxwell and Charlie's origin story. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to watch it for yourself, but basically, a failed magic show leads to both of them getting sucked into the constant by them. Compromising statue. Have you ever thought that Don't Starve was too difficult? Well, apparently the mobile port of the game thought so too, so they added a no sweat difficulty. All this game mode does is add a statue that can revive you an infinite number of times. Essentially, an infinite touchstone. What better way is there to make Don't Starve easier than to remove the danger of dying? However, according to the wiki, it's possible to be spawn camped at this statue, which I found absolutely hilarious. It's ironic how the thing that's meant to reduce stats in the game can actually make you die more from spawn camping. Now you may be under the impression that this is a mobile exclusive, but that is far from true. In Don't Starve Together, you can change the game mode to endless to allow people to revive at the portal an infinite number of times. Though at least here, it comes at the cost of your max health. Similarly, setting the game to wilderness mode will allow you to respawn after you die, although your map progress will be lost. This system is arguably more strong than the compromising statue, since dying in wilderness mode lets you change character for free, and we all know how broken character swapping can be. Team Fortress 2 is a game. But did you know that some Don't Starve items were added to this game in 2013? You heard that correctly. If you pre-ordered Don't Starve before April the 23rd of 2013, you would get the Ham Shank and the Wilson Weave. The Wilson Weave is just another hat that allows you to become Wilson Don't Starve in Team Fortress 2. The Ham Shank, on the other hand, is a melee reskin which lets you hit players with a ham bat. As far as I know, this is the only time Don't Starve did something like this, but who knows. Maybe they'll do something like this in another game again in the future. You know those public Clay servers? The ones that inevitably reset when everyone dies? What if you were to make one last thousands of days? Just get a group of dedicated people to take shifts so that someone is always on the server, and you could end up with a seriously high day count in a clay server that anyone can join. This is exactly what some individuals were thinking of a few years ago, and so they quickly got to work on creating a long-lasting public server. It's not entirely clear how many players were in this group, or if they even existed in the first place, but what is clear is that it worked. A server by the name of Clayfish was here, managed to survive over 1,000 days. They were always playing the game and building some impressive structures while they do it. On another server inspired by the Clayfish one, this heart was built out of moonglass pawns surrounding 9 Houndius Shudius. They would have had to kill the fuel weaver at least 8 times just to get enough resources for 9 turrets. Since new players kept joining this server to check out what was going on, it eventually made it to day 8000. If every day in Don't Starve is 8 minutes, then reaching 8,000 days would take 1,066 consecutive hours. That is 44 straight days that this Clay official server managed to survive without a single griefer regenerating the world. However, there was one world that got an even higher day count, and you can see what it looked like in these streams, which as far as I can tell is footage of the highest day count on a Clay official public server. The Catgoon Den server managed to reach day 10,000, with some of the people there surviving for thousands of days. It's kind of crazy how this public server that anyone can join managed to survive far longer than most private servers. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and it was inevitable that this server would also get regenerated. All those thousands of days of work gone, to probably something as trivial as no one being in the server. As I was researching all of this, I found a really bizarre story by this forum user. In it, he describes his encounter with a strange rock with a boat inside of it. Apparently this boat was vibrating like crazy while stuck inside of the rock. He soul hopped onto the boat and somehow he could stand on it. It's kind of weird, right? Well, it gets stranger. Almost 3,000 days later, he comes in contact with the rock again. This time he sails closer to the rock with his boat. As his boat gets closer to the rock, suddenly it gets stuck and will not move no matter what he does. He attempts to jump on the vibrating boat, but this time it makes him drown. He returns with another boat and tries to break it free by ramming one into the other, but in his own words, it didn't budge an inch. Any boat he tried to make around this mysterious rock also got stuck, almost like it had magnetic properties. This was a Bermuda Circle where no ship could ever return from. I have no idea how something like this can exist, but I guess that's what you encounter when you join a day 6000 public server. Smash Up is something that can only be described as Super Smash Bros. Don't Starve drug trip. This mod started development 5 years ago and is still not available to the public. It's essentially one of the most creative mods in existence, and it's something only one guy on the planet can play. So what about the gameplay? Well, there's 5 different characters to choose from. Wilson, Wicker, Maxwell, Woody and Wes. Each of them have their own attacks that you would expect them to have in a fighting game. For example, Woody uses his axe to attack the other survivors. Maxwell can summon a shadow clone to help him fight. Wilson throws potions to attack the other players. There's even a single player mode in which you have to fight some AI spiders to win. Really, the only bad part about this mod is that it's not playable, but luckily it might be coming out soon. Near the beginning of 2021, we got an update video from Pickle Player in which he claims that work is being done on the mod again.
It is actually coming soon, for real. I wanted to make sure that I could actually get this thing done before I continued talking about it, and it is. We're right there at the finish line.
However, it's now been 8 months, and not only has Minecraft Don't Starve come out in that time, but we have no new updates on the Smash Up mod. So, will the mod ever come out? I'd hope that it would, but only time will tell if I will be able to kill Wilson at 15%. Cheeky Chris is the nickname given to the forum user guy named Chris. After skimming through his messages, he seems to be just another guy on the forums. But one fateful day, that would all change when Chris decided to post a chat log between him and a developer. The massive consequences of this action would be felt everywhere in the world. The name Cheeky Chris was added to the world files, and Chris was banished into the constant where he would forever stay as a pigman. That last part's not true, but the rest is. This guy somehow managed to be added as a pigman into the game. And to this day, Cheeky Chris is the only user from the community that was ever added as a pig name. If I were to ask you what the strongest boss in Don't Starve is, what would you say? Ancient Fuel Weaver? Celestial Champion? Maybe Misery Toadstool with his 100,000 health? Well, according to a James Bucket video, all of those are wrong. The real strongest boss has been under our noses the entire time. Maxwell Don't Starve. He has 70,000 hours on the game and 10 million health in the game. Not only that, but he must have installed some kind of hacked client because anytime you hit him, he destroys your weapon and strikes you with lightning. The strongest weapon in the game is the Dark Sword, dealing a massive 68 damage per hit. But because Maxwell only lets you use one hit with each weapon, you would need 147,059 Dark Swords to kill him. Getting that many Dark Swords to kill him is basically impossible, and even if you could do that, it's not even worth it. When you kill Maxwell, his sprite will disappear, but the ending will play out exactly the same. So essentially, there is zero reward for doing this, and you're not even intended to do it, so don't do it. But what if you did do it? The optimal strategy for killing Maxwell Don't Starve legitimately is to play as Wix. You see, every time lightning strikes Wix, it will heal him to full instead of damaging him. This means that if you're patient enough, you can sit there punching Maxwell as Wix and you will eventually kill him. Sure, it will take you 40 straight hours of punching, but you will kill Maxwell. Twitch Plays Together is yet another official mod made by a developer, and just like the other ones, it also doesn't work anymore. However, this mod is quite a special one, as it seemed to be bigger in scale than the other ones. What the mod does is it allows the Twitch chat to control random events around the streamer. For example, the chat would vote on Frog Rain and then Frog Rain would appear. Anything from making the player bigger to giving them 0 sanity could happen, making it a very chaotic mod. It gave you two options. You could choose to be a kind-hearted soul and pick options that can help the streamer. Or you could go full genocide mode and vote the worst options possible. This mod was so great that it was given not 1, not 2, but 3 categories on the Steam Workshop all for itself. There's literally 3 categories and all that there is in them is this one mod. But since the mod doesn't work anymore, there's no point in visiting any of these categories at all. I think the idea of this mod is better than the mod we ended up getting. You can vote for negative options, but they will likely not impact the streamer at all. Most of the options are temporary and would revert themselves after a while. For example, after your sanity gets set to 0, it will return you to full sanity after a few seconds, making the entire event redundant. Similarly, if chat voted to make the player bigger, the change would also undo itself after a few seconds. It just makes the vote feel like it achieved nothing. Watching some gameplay of this mod on YouTube is incredibly boring. You know that none of the events will impact the gameplay, so you're just waiting for the streamer's reaction to an event that lasts less than 30 seconds. It's honestly a shame that this mod was abandoned, since it had a lot of potential, but for now, all we're left with is 3 dead categories on the Steam Workshop. Flop spawning error is one of the weirdest bugs in this entire game. There's these flop guys who spawn in a specific biome in Shipwrecked. All you really need to know is that they have invisible spawners in the marsh biome. Here's the problem with that. Despite the spawners, once you kill all the flops, no more will spawn. But why is that? Well, let's take a look at the flop spawning process. The game first checks if the invisible spawner is on marsh turf. Makes sense so far, right? You need the correct turf to spawn these guys. There's a second check afterwards that makes zero sense. After checking that the spawner is on marsh turf, the game then checks to see if the spawner is on the water. What? The flop spawner must simultaneously be on land and on water. How the hell does that make any sense? This almost doesn't feel like a bug due to how intentional this seems. There's no way you accidentally code two checks that oppose each other. And to this day, this bug has not been fixed, and it's still in the game. No idea why this is, so I might as well move on. The Glutton tournament is the first thing on this iceberg that I am not 100% certain about, due to the lack of information on it, and also because any video showcasing the event is gone. This was another official clay mod that doesn't work anymore, but this time it was used at a real life event in a real life tournament. That's right, someone had to play Don't Starve as optimally as possible in front of a crowd of people watching. Apparently, in 2015 and possibly 2017, there was a contest hosted by Clay which was the Glutton tournament. To win this tournament, you and your team had to gain more calories than the other team. I am not making this up, you had to eat the most amount of food before the time ran out to win. This went on for 2 rounds, which I wish I could show you, but unfortunately there's no footage of it anywhere online. The final round was slightly different, because Clay had yet another mod hiding up their sleeve, the Pig Feed Tournament mode. It functioned exactly the same as the previous rounds, but this time you had to feed the Pig King. Whoever fed him the most calories ended up winning the entire tournament. You know, this mod actually sounds like fun. Too bad no one made a fix to it on the workshop. It's so weird how this tournament that supposedly happened is basically lost media. You'd think there would be a re-upload of it on YouTube, but nope, there's nothing. Here's another one I knew very little about before researching it. Let me take you back to 2017 when the Forge was first playable. If you've ever played the Forge, you don't need me to tell you that it is fun. There was a skill ceiling to this mode that wasn't just hold F to win. Basically, if you cancel your attack animation, you can get in more attacks than usual and do more damage. If you ever wanted to speedrun the Forge, then you would have to do a lot of attack cancelling. There are 2 main methods people use. The first one is fairly simple. If you can retarget your attack to another enemy, it will instantly attack them. Meaning, if you spam click between multiple enemies, you can turn into a living machine gun. It's pretty easy to cancel your attack animation if there's multiple enemies. But what are you meant to do if there's only one? The answer comes from the second, admittedly harder method. If you move while attacking, you can cancel your attack animation while still hitting the enemy. The faster you can perform this technique, the more damage you deal. Be careful though, because if you mess it up, you can end up doing less damage than normal. It's a high risk, high reward kind of thing, but in the end, it's just a little thing you can do if you want to get better at the Forge. But I'm sure it won't turn into anything crazy. Enter the Forge 2 leaderboard. The people who can complete the Forge in the fastest time will be put at the top of this leaderboard. That's right, you can now show others how much time you've wasted on this game. Wait a second. Why do I hear the sound of robotic? Oh, it's all bots. As it turns out, if you add a leaderboard to a game with really difficult inputs, people will start using scripts to automate them. For a while there was a mod literally called Cheating Forge, which attacks at an optimal pace for you. I'm assuming it was removed from the workshop because of the outrage it caused. Though this did nothing to change it. People began coding their own private mods, which would play the game at a perfect pace for them. The entire top of the leaderboard was filled with bots, and the only way to beat them was to join them. There was no longer a point in trying to be good at the game when bots can do anything you can do better. Here's how fast I was attacking in a real game with real people. Here's another video I found on a Chinese site, and just look at this. You can't tell me real players are attacking that fast. Ultimately, Clay decided to remove animation cancelling in the Forge. And that's where the story ends. Whatever your thoughts on the situation are, just remember that this event happened 3 years ago and it doesn't really matter now. On the bright side, from what I can tell, the Reforged mod lets you attack cancel, so that's nice. The Deerclops smile is something so obscure that even the wiki hardly touches on it. If you can get Deerclops to destroy 6 structures, he will make the strangest smile known to exist. This smile has absolutely no gameplay impact, and you will still die for standing near him. I have no idea why this small detail is in the game, but I guess it's cool that it exists. Field notes are a series of blog posts from the perspective of Wilson. 3 field notes were posted on a now defunct web page between June 25th to July the 31st in 2012. I won't bother reading them out for you, but feel free to pause the video if you want to have a look at them. There's no new information you can gather from these, other than the fact that Wilson probably invented the me effigy. I'm going to assume that these were used as a clever way to show off updates, but I could be wrong. Warley eats lawn pig. This theory suggests that Warley's favorite dish is lawn pig. There's a food item which is not in the game, and Warley also doesn't have a favorite dish. Clearly this is because lawn pig is his favorite dish. This theory is not only completely stupid, but also wrong. If you examine lawn pig as Warley, he claims that some dishes probably shouldn't be made. Furthermore, examining dried lawn pig gives us the quote, "I think I've lost my appetite." Warley clearly does not like lawn pig, never mind considers it his favorite dish. It would be absurd if Clay specifically gave Warley positive stats for a removed item. That just doesn't make any sense. However, this got me thinking. What if one of the characters has a quote that implies they approve of this meat? It sounds crazy, but there is 18 different characters in the game. Surely one of them likes the idea of human meat. So I set out on a quest to look at every character's quote for lawn pig, and trust me, you are not going to like what I found. Starting off with Wilson. His quotes are a bit weird. He seems to question where he should draw the line, stating that flesh is flesh. But what he says for dried lawn pig is very incriminating. Letting it dry makes it not come from a human, right? It's like he knows eating other people is bad, but he tries to justify it anyway. The majority of other characters don't have a quote for lawn pig, and seem to reuse Wilson's dialogue. Since they all use the same quote, I think it would be unfair to call any of them cannibals, since it's probably just placeholder text. Although, there is 4 characters who have special quotes for lawn pig. One of them is Warley. who has already stated his feelings on the subject. There's also Winona and Wirt, who really dislike the concept of human meat, but the last character's thoughts on Lawn Pig feels like a betrayal. Wormwood, the guy who is always caring for plants and is just a cute character overall, says that Lawn Pig is belly stuff. He is the only character in the game who doesn't say anything bad about Lawn Pig, and instead enjoys it. That's his quote for cooked Lawn Pig. What the hell, Wormwood? Maybe the reason you don't have any friends is because you ate them all. The game even encourages Wormwood to eat this meat. Normally, Lawn Pig would reduce your health by 20 when consumed. However, because Wormwood doesn't suffer health damage from eating food, this means absolutely nothing to him. He is the only character who could survive solely off of Lawn Pig with no downside. Honestly, I'm writing this script right now, and like the idea of this sounds stupid, but I can't shake the feeling that this was done on purpose. Not only is Wormwood one of the few characters to even have a special quote about a removed item, but his thoughts on it correlate with his downside. You can't tell me that this wasn't an intentional detail hidden in the files. I don't want to talk about this monster longer than I have to, so let's move on. Willow is a witch. This theory comes from a James Bucket video, which comes from a forum thread that compiles all of this evidence. I'll leave a link to that video and said forum thread if you want to have a deeper look, but here's the summary. The theory states that Willow is a witch, due to her name relating to magic and witchcraft. Not only does she have the magical power of pyrokinesis, but the willow tree is commonly associated with witches due to its use for various medical treatments. If that's not enough for you, then you should take a look at how she's presented in this official Halloween image. I don't know about you, but there's not much things that wear this specific hat and ride a broom. Although you could make the argument that this is just a Halloween costume, and that dressing up as a witch for hallowed nights does not make you a witch. However, there's one thing that undeniably proves her real identity. When you purchase the Willow Funko Pop, you gain an item called the Fiery Witch's Hat. Out of all skins that could have been chosen for her, it's an actual 100% real, not clickbait witch's hat. This isn't just a game of dress up, this is who she is. In the James Bucket video there's another claim which states that Willow is Japanese, but I don't want to talk about it here since none of the evidence presented feels concrete enough. So I'll just move on. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake was a real-world event which killed an estimated 3,000 people. Despite the earthquake only lasting less than a minute, it was enough to destroy 500 city blocks and cause multiple fires. It's kind of scary how powerful this thing was. But wait a second. Why am I talking about a real-life event in this video? Well, there's a theory that Maxwell is the one responsible for this earthquake. According to the lore, San Francisco is the city where Maxwell spent his time performing on stage. On April 17th of 1906, he performs his final act before being sucked into the constant. This leads to the idea that the sheer power needed to pull Maxwell in was enough to cause a real-life earthquake. Story-wise, it makes sense. Both the date and place of Maxwell's show match the time and location of the San Francisco earthquake. Technically though, it could be just a massive coincidence, but luckily there's some evidence which says otherwise. In the beginning of the Winona rework video, there's some kind of conspiracy board connecting various events from the narrative. In the center of a bunch of missing posters, we see a news headline reading, "San Francisco ablaze." Remember when I said this earthquake caused multiple fires around the city? Yeah, this is referencing that earthquake. Is the developer's way of saying, yes, this is not a coincidence, this is part of the story. I like the idea of Maxwell causing a real-life event, because it makes the story more believable. The Grue. This is a creature that originates from a computer game made by Infocom all the way back in 1980. In this game, if you stay in the dark for too long, you get eaten by a Gru, a monster which lives in the darkness. The game doesn't tell you what the Gru looks like, it just tells you that it hides in the darkness. Turns a natural fear of the dark into a game mechanic. Don't stay in the dark for too long or a scary monster will kill you. After Zork became a success, the Gru appeared in many other Infocom games, which made this creature incredibly popular. Nowadays, the Gru is a homage to early PC gaming, which is most likely why Charlie is called Gru in the code. You have to remember, back in early Don't Starve, Charlie wasn't even created yet. Darkness literally killing you was just another way to make the game more difficult. The developers needed something to call this thing, so you know what, why not make a reference to an early PC game while you do it. For the majority of people, this simply became a name for the darkness in Don't Starve, but for others, it became something more. For some people, the Gru was an ultra powerful creature that would hide in the darkness of the Constant, something super scary and more powerful than the player himself. Basically, a badly written horror story, like this literacy masterpiece I found. Think I'll read this in another video, because this one, I don't know how someone had the intelligence to create this peak of media. Anyways, let's move on. Believe it or not, there are a bunch of times when Wes actually spoke words. Yes, you heard that right. The character whose entire gimmick is that he can't speak can actually be forced to say words. Although all of them are through exploits and bugs. In this clip, we see the impossible happen. After failing to use a wardrobe, Wes says, "I can't change while it's on fire." Obviously, this is just an error message put into the game for a really specific situation, but it ends up looking surreal when it's used on a character who's not supposed to talk. There were a few other times this happened, but of course, they are all patched. Don't worry though, since this specific bug seems to always reappear in one form or another, so I'm sure we'll eventually see another bug that makes Wes speak. The Pelontrix is probably the Herobrine of Don't Starve, except if we didn't know what Herobrine looked like or what he did. There's not much information about this guy, since the threads where he originated from are completely deleted. Apparently, a developer by the name of Kevin is the one who started this myth back in 2013. From what I can gather, someone at some point posted a picture of a furry rock. On this thread, Kevin reportedly stated, "Strange, the Pelontrix shouldn't be in the game anymore," which ended up throwing some people off the deep end. Suddenly, the Pelontrix became this mythical-like creature who would come for you on day 1000 and kill you. I have no idea why people thought a sleeping werepig was scary, but then again this was the time when creepypastas were everywhere, so you know what, sure. Eventually people figured out who the Pelontrix is. He is the Shadow Wilson. You may be wondering, what is this Shadow Wilson guy? Well, according to another Don't Starve developer, this is the Pelontrix. He used to appear in single-player Don't Starve above the update timer. Funnily enough, opening up an old version of Don't Starve today will completely break this timer and give you a ridiculous number. Can't wait for the next update in -3000 days. I don't know how this happened, but eventually the Shadow Wilson became a merch item that you can still purchase right now. This is the same place where you can buy other strange figures like Zombie Wes. I don't know who had the idea to make these variants of regular characters, but they exist now. It's kind of crazy how this whole thing started off from a random one-off joke. Makes you think about the unintended consequences of your small actions. What is Wickfrid's real name? If you don't know, Wickfrid is not actually her real name, but rather a stage name, the name of the character she is playing. In the Wickfrid rework video, we can see the name of the actor behind Wickford in a newspaper. But this is so heavily crossed out that you can't tell what it says. I tried to edit this and remove some of the scribbles, but whatever is there is clearly not meant to be read. I just don't think her real name is Miail, because not only does that sound incredibly stupid, but it also does not exist. There's nothing you can solve here that will give you her real name, so the only thing you can do is speculate. So let's do some speculating. If you look at the code, you can see that her file name is Whatgritter. Unlike the rest of the characters, Wickford seems to have a different name in the files. Is Whatgritter her real name? Maybe. As it turns out, Whatgritter is not a name that currently exists, however Rotgritter does. It was one of those names that Valkyries would have back in the day, and I guess Clay took it and stuck a W to the front of it for consistency. So then, is her real name Whatgritter? Maybe. Like I said, there's no official statement on what it could be, so any theory you can make is going to sound flimsy at best. Another one says that her real name is Winnie. This comes from a scrapped character who looks suspiciously similar to Wickford. And wouldn't you know it, that scrapped character's name is Winnie. So it's possible that Wickford's name is Winnie and that this is what she looks like off stage. I don't know which of these theories are better, but it doesn't matter. I don't think Clay themselves even knows what Wickford's real name is, and this newspaper was probably just put there to mess with us. Wipitsky. This is the name of a character who was found in the files of Shipwrecked, along with Wolani, Woodlex and Warley. There's nothing else known about this character other than the fact that it's most likely a reference to a similarly named character in a game called Time Force. So, is that it? Why is a scrapped character so deep on here? Well, I'll tell you why. This name appeared again 3 years later in the early access Hamlet files. However, this time it came in the animation folder as a zip file. If you extracted this zip file, you would get this. Why is there a fairy in my game? Well, apparently this sprite is not official. In fact, this is from a sample mod character that was posted 4 years before this Hamlet discovery. This mod would help you create your own character, and it even has a video tutorial on how to use it. It's essentially a sample mod that anyone can use to make whatever they want. So then, why was this sample character in the files? Unfortunately, no one knows, as there's never been an official response to this. My best guess is that some hardcore, experienced programmer forgot how to make a new character, so he used this community mod template. Mayor of Pigtown is the original name for the earliest version of Don't Starve. The initial idea was completely different to what we have now, as it was intended to be a monetized free-to-play town building simulator. So, a mobile game. But how did the game go from centering around a casual audience to one which clearly enjoys pain and suffering? What other kind of person would play a game where your 10 hours of work can be deleted in an instance? The answers to all of these questions lie in this GDC video made on April 1st of 2016. In this video we have a developer talking about how they created a community around an antisocial game. I'm going to be focused on the early iterations of Don't Starve, but there's a lot more discussed in this video that won't be covered here, so I recommend that you watch it yourself if you have the time. Anyways, Don't Starve started out as a game jam. Apparently, Clay holds their own game jam every year right before Christmas, as it improves the morale and gets that creative juice flowing. In this small game that was created, you play as Link. Like, they literally took 16-bit Link and put him in. There's a day and night cycle, and the goal is to survive for as long as possible around a campfire. Kind of reminds me of something. Now, your health and hunger was the same stat, so you had to make sure that your hunger was up, otherwise you would die. To get food, pigs would come at night, and they can be killed for meat which you could eat at the campfire. A very simple game, but an interesting concept. Later, he states that Clay wanted to make a game by a small team of 4 people, just to get it out as quick as possible. The idea was that if you could release an early build of something on the internet, people could play it and tell you what they thought. Essentially, you're going to be throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. So, why not make the little game jam game into a fully fledged free-to-play game? What's the worst that could happen? Well, as it turns out, a lot could happen, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's take a look at the vision for this Mayor of Pigtown game. Here's some concept art of it, and yeah, it looks nothing like Don't Starve. The closest thing relating to Don't Starve here is the pigmen, but even they look a lot different. Everything just looks so bright and cheery. You can tell they were trying to appeal to as much people as possible with this art style. The main idea of this game was that it was actually 2 games in one. One half of it would be a pig town building simulator in which you build a pig town. The other half is you going on some kind of adventure run and then gathering whatever resources you can get and bringing them back to the pig town. So, a mobile game. Like imagine building a science machine, except it takes 9 days to build and the only way to speed it up is by buying 900 gems. That's the kind of game I imagine this would turn into, and I'm glad it didn't go down that path. The funny part is, because they focused so much on the adventure runs over the pig town, it would become so developed that the pay-to-win town building aspect was completely abandoned. This adventure mode wasn't anything like modern Don't Starve. Instead, it was a bunch of linear levels that were intended to be cleared in a short amount of time. This idea fell apart when people spent an hour going through these levels. They were intended to be cleared in 10 to 15 minutes, but because Don't Starve has so much little complexities that go against this method of play, it didn't work, and players spent much more time on these levels than expected. This might not sound bad, but when it took the 3 developers and 1 artist a full week to make a basic level, this wouldn't work in the long term if you're expected to pump out levels all the time. The game at its core was flawed, so the developers were forced to go back to the drawing board. What came out was closer to what we have today, a randomly generated world with a bunch of biomes. And by biomes, I mean bridges connecting to circular islands of some type. Interestingly enough, in this version, people were having fun, but there was one mechanic that polarized the players. One mechanic that to this day still drives some off from playing. Permadeath. Once you die, that's it. The world's gone and you have to start over. Sure, there are ways to counteract this, but it's still one of the defining traits of Don't Starve. It even seemed to have an effect on the art style. This image shows the development of it. It started out fairly inoffensive before a very mean Wilson was drawn. But there was a problem. A big problem. The reason the game was developed by a small team was so that they could create a free-to-play game and monetize it. However, the game they ended up making flew in the face of all of that. What are you supposed to monetize in a game like this? You can't charge for more hunger or extra lives since that doesn't fit the uncompromising style the game had. Not to mention, it would be pretty easy to farm anything that was purchasable due to how sandboxy Don't Starve is. If you could pay to get meat, then players would just create a pig farm and mass farm meat. The monetization system just would not work, and it was scrapped. And from there, the developers continued on to create a successful survival game. It's kind of ironic how they set out to make the most monetizable and friendly game as possible, but ended up making the opposite of that. And here it is. The forbidden knowledge was hidden all the way underneath everything else. If you press that button in the middle of the room, you will learn the truth about the world around you. Nothing you see after this point will be the same, as the illusion will be broken. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Why? That's weird, nothing's happened yet. Oh right, yeah, okay. Remember how I said you needed to be at full sanity near the start of the video in order to understand them? I'm going to need you to do the opposite. If all merms are human ones, then what the hell is a wort? Wouldn't she be a child that got turned into a merm? There's a whole secret backstory here and we don't know anything about it. Kinda weird how Wagstaff and Wilson have the same haircut. What if Wagstaff is an older version of Wilson traveling back in time with the knowledge he gained from the future? This would explain how he seems to know everything about anything. The original idea for Don't Starve was a town building simulator. Wouldn't that mean that they have been working on Hamlet this entire time? Wouldn't that also mean that New Home was a project being worked on from the beginning? This was all part of their plan to release a Don't Starve. Why the hell is this called single player if you can find another playable character here? Who else is in here that I don't know about? How can Maxwell move if he's stuck on a chair? Voice is an instrument, then wouldn't that make a ragtime a bunch of people screaming? This whole game isn't just a part of Maxwell's act. The stage background looks eerily similar to that of The Constant. Not to mention how a lot of the survivors are either actors or performers. How come Maxwell doesn't lose his finger when he puts his finger on Flint? How is it possible that the characters are able to hold so much random crap? Why do all the characters even see in third person anyway? How does eating ice cream make you not insane? How is the surface holding itself up if there's a void underneath it? The cave should be flooded if there's literal oceans of water above it. How can any of this make any logical sense? Wait. Don't Starve is actually a video game.